Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, May the 14th, 2024. Yesterday there was a conjunction between the Sun and Uranus, and my plan yesterday was to discuss this conjunction and what it might mean in terms of individual horoscopes and also in terms of events. But I found myself talking about the Eurovision Song Contest, and so I'm going to do today what I was planning on doing yesterday, and that means I'm going to discuss the conjunction between the Sun and Uranus, and I'm going to look at a number of horoscopes of people who do have the Sun conjunct Uranus, and also some events which took place at the time of this conjunction. But before I do that, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today. And so here is the horoscope for today, which is Tuesday, May the 14th, 2024. And as always, I've set it for New York at noon. There's no special reason why I've gone for New York. I just thought it would be a good average place to use. And we can see that at noon, the moon is right in the middle of Leo. So it doesn't matter what your time zone is today, the moon is in Leo all day long. And it is making a trine to Mars. So it's quite a fiery day in its own way. I mean, we've got the moon in Leo, which is a fire sign. We've got Mars in Aries, which is a fire sign. We've got Mercury in Aries, another fire sign. And there is going to be a spark. We're going to be able to, make things happen. And there could be a certain amount of excitement, and I think that trine between the moon and Mars is particularly useful. So if we're bored and we want some action, then that moon trine Mars is going to actually be able to create that action. Though I suppose it is a trine. And when you've got a trine, you might find that sometimes things get out of control very quickly. It's a trine. It's just easy energy. Things move from one state to another state, and it doesn't take long before things get completely out of control. So maybe you shouldn't put too much energy into getting results, because otherwise you might, as I've just said, lose control. A little bit of energy may be all it takes. And aside from the moon making this trine to Mars, the moon also makes a square to Venus. And that square between the moon and Venus, it may actually be a little bit indulgent. The moon in Leo, it's quite a proud placement for Leo, and I suppose moon in Leo might be attracted to things that glitter, might want to look good, and maybe might try too hard to look good. That might be a possibility with moon square Venus. With that square, you don't want to be seen to try too hard, but I think there's a danger that you could try too hard. And I suppose if you make too much of an effort to make something look good, it may end up not looking good at all, because harmony, aesthetics, beauty, it should be natural to an extent. And I just think there could be a bit of a problem with that moon square Venus. Also, moon square Venus do have to be a little bit careful with money, because there might be a certain temptation to spend too much money. And in terms of the geocentric aspects, actually, that is about it. I mean, there are a few midpoints of note. For example, we have got Mercury is aspecting the Jupiter Aries midpoint. I mean, that sounds a bit obscure, but it is. So Mercury aspecting the Jupiter Aries midpoint might mean that in terms of how we communicate, there could be something very definite that we're trying to get across. We might have plans. We might feel that it's time to take action. And with Mercury on a Jupiter Aries midpoint, we can be very clear about our vision. And, we don't have to use too many words. In fact, we shouldn't use too many words. Just be very clear about what we want to see. And I think that people will understand that. And perhaps that will be a cue for them to take action, perhaps on our suggestion. Another midpoint that's worth noting is that Mars is aspecting the Sun-Jupiter midpoint. So there's the Sun, there's Jupiter. So you can see that the midpoint between the Sun and Jupiter is approximately 25, 26 Taurus. So Mars at 10 Aries making a 45-degree aspect to that Sun-Jupiter midpoint. So Sun-Jupiter is about the principle of expressing ourselves, expressing our vision and our optimism. And with Mars aspecting the Sun-Jupiter midpoint, we can really do that, and we can be quite assertive in how we show the world what we want. Now, it may not be us being assertive. It could be other people. It could be that there are people who are going to be absolutely clear about what they want to be done. And such people could be a bit overwhelming, though I think in most cases they mean well. They think they've got it all sorted out, and it just takes a little bit of action and everything will be fine. I'm not saying that we should necessarily do what people say. I think there's going to be a temptation to just do what people say because they're going to be so sure of themselves. But just because someone is sure of themselves doesn't mean that we should drop everything and follow them. Maybe they're right. Maybe they've made a mistake. Maybe they've misunderstood the situation. Turning to the heliocentric picture, that means looking at the solar system from a perspective of the Sun, where it should be. Sun is center of the solar system. And if we look at what's going on, we find that there are two sextiles heliocentrically. So one sextile is Mercury sextile Neptune. And so Mercury is a planet of communication. It's sextile Neptune. And that gives us the capacity to be quite sensitive. I mean, people are going to be sensitive and they're going to be picking up on a load of stuff, perhaps stuff that they don't always understand. And that can be a problem. Just because you have correctly got hold of the information doesn't mean that you're going to be able to sort that information out in a coherent way. Information on its own can actually be quite a dangerous thing because we might just not know how to handle it. So it's just important to be perhaps a little relaxed when we've got a load of information. Don't jump to conclusions about it. Still, we are going to be sensitive, and we can perhaps use this sensitivity to try to understand the environment in which we are communicating with. And in certain situations, that might allow us to be gently manipulative. I mean, after all, if we understand the people we're talking to, we can then know what we have to say. Another sextile happening today is a sextile between Venus and Mars. So you've got a Venus-Mars sextile. that can be attractive and charismatic, and a lot of us, we're going to know how to get our way, and people are going to like us. Charisma is going to be something very important today. Maybe it's about our charisma, or it could be how we are influenced by someone else's charisma. So where does the balance lie? And I think that might be an important point today. Are you the one who is going to be making things happen, or are you going to be the one who's going to be manipulated and persuaded? Now, being manipulated and being persuaded, that's not how it's supposed to be. We're supposed to be a leader and not a follower, but sometimes there's nothing wrong with being manipulated and persuaded. I suppose it depends what's at stake. If nothing much is at stake, then it's not a problem. But of course, if someone is trying to manipulate you as a way, for example, of getting money out of you, then that is not such a good thing. And because we've got these two sextiles, we do have a midpoint configuration forming. So there is Mercury sextile Neptune, there is Mars sextile Venus, and that means that the Venus-Mercury midpoint is on the Mars-Neptune midpoint. I think you should be able to see this by eye. You see, there is Venus and Mercury, and there is Mars and Neptune. And you can see a symmetry between the two. Mercury-Venus on the Mars-Neptune midpoint. And this could work in a number of ways. At worst, I suppose, we have the capacity to wrap other people up in a web of lies. That's possible. We could even wrap ourselves up in a web of our own lies. So there is a danger there. But we can at the same time be gently charismatic, and we can appear to offer something almost sort of mysterious. There's just something about us that is attractive, but we are still holding something back, and perhaps that is the mystery of Mars and Neptune coming together. And when you fit Mars-Neptune when you fit it together with Mercury-Venus, it's very, very alluring. And is it us being alluring? Are we the ones being allured? So we do need to bear that in mind. And I suppose if we find ourselves at the receiving end of, for example, some clever sales talk, we have to be careful, avoid making decisions. As always, there's someone on the phone it's actually, with the phone, we've got a landline. I think actually it seems to me that the only reason for having a landline is just so that you give spammers some way of getting in touch with you. It's like a service you're giving to spammers, having a landline. At least that's my experience of having a landline. I don't see the point. It's just a means for spammers to get in touch with you. So be careful what's coming in on your phone, whether it's your cell phone or a landline, if you have a landline. It's just a way for people to just try to influence you. But I suppose they can knock on your door. And they don't necessarily want your money. They might want your soul. For example, if they're religious people knocking on your door. But it's difficult dealing with people knocking on your door selling religion. I'm always disappointed by them. It always seems a bit boring. I don't know. I really want to be. I'd love someone to knock on the door and completely change everything to show me the way for salvation. But no one succeeded yet. Anyway, maybe today is the exception. Maybe they'll find a way with the Mars-Neptune midpoint on the Venus-Mercury on the Mercury-Venus midpoint. But now, having looked at one thing I should point out, of course, before I leave the heliocentric chart, is that yesterday there was a Sun-Uranus conjunction. that Sun-Uranus conjunction is still very much with us. Just because it's 1 degree out, still there. And of course, I'm looking at it from a heliocentric perspective. I'm looking at a Earth-Uranus opposition. By definition, a Sun-Uranus conjunction is the same as an Earth-Uranus opposition. So there's the Earth at 2420 Scorpio, and it's 1 degree separating from the Uranus at 23.7 Taurus. So yes, it's separating, but still there's plenty of capacity there for drama. So drama is something we really need to be on the lookout for, and we shouldn't expect things necessarily to work to plan. Having done all that, I think it's now time to look at the 12 signs. So let me change the coordinates, go back to the regular horoscope, and let's just, while I'm at it, change the house system. We don't need the Placidus house system here. There we are. Okay, these are my forecasts for today for the 12 signs for Tuesday, May the 14th, 2024. Aries, today you do have a lot of energy at your disposal. After all, the moon is in Leo and it is making a trine to Mars, which is your ruler. Further, the moon is making a trine to the North Node. And so I think, Aries, you're going to be able to really get things done. And I don't think you have to plan it. In fact, I don't think it's actually desirable to plan things today. I think if possible, Aries, you should really try to be spontaneous. You don't have to spend a lot of time analyzing things. So in most cases, you can rely on your intuition. And when I'm talking about intuition, Aries, I have to really make sure I make it clear what that means. Intuition is not the same as emotional sensitivity. Intuition is just knowing what to do. It's obvious, and a lot of things today are going to be obvious. They don't have to be explained, they don't have to be rationalized, you don't have to spend ages analyzing them. You're just going to know exactly what to do. Now, I suppose I don't want to encourage you to act in a hasty and reckless way. So you have to bear in mind that, a bit of caution, I suppose, is required, but still, I don't think it's going to take long for you to make up your mind. In fact, I don't think there's any real need for any real mental process, because the way forward for you will, I think, be very obvious. And once you've made a decision, and I do think you're going to be able to make your decisions quickly, I think that in most cases you will be able to carry everyone with you. Because from a heliocentric view, Venus is sextile Mars. Mars is your ruler. So with a heliocentric Venus sextile Mars, I would have thought that would make you very charismatic. And I think that the more sure you are that you're doing the right thing, the more charismatic you will be. I think that what people really value, rightly or wrongly, is certainty. If someone seems 100% certain, then people like that, which is kind of a bit unfair on people who like to think things through, who don't like to commit themselves. But people want answers, and so if you are 100% certain about what is the right course of action, which I think you may well be, I think that people are just going to listen to you and they're going to follow you. And so, yes, Aries. I think it's going to be a day when you can be very dynamic and your creative vision can be put into action without really having to think about it. Taurus, there is still a big build-up in your sign. Okay, the moon may have left Taurus quite some time ago, but still we have got Venus in Taurus, Uranus in Taurus, the Sun in Taurus, Jupiter in Taurus, and there is a Sun-Uranus conjunction still, and at the same time the Sun is starting to move onto the Jupiter-Uranus midpoint. I therefore think that you are going to be pretty dynamic, and there will be a certain sense of certainty here with all that stuff in Taurus. Taurus is a fixed sign, and you may just think that you do know it all, and at the same time you're not really going to be in the mood for making changes. And maybe at the moment that's actually okay. I mean, you can't just keep making changes, because if you keep making changes, you're never going to get anything done. And I think that your fixity of purpose could actually serve you very well. And so, also, with Sun conjunct Uranus, okay, it was exact yesterday, it's still there. A Sun conjunct Uranus as a combination is very independent-minded. And you don't want to listen to other people, you don't want to have to change your plans. And so in most cases, if you have decided on a course of action, then just go for it. Be a juggernaut, just moving in one direction. I think in most cases you won't have made a mistake, but always consider that as a possibility. I mean, I have to say that. We can never be 100% sure that we have got all the answers. That's just not possible. But yeah, I think that in most cases it is going to be okay. And I would have said, Taurus, though, you do still need a little bit of flexibility, because with that Sun conjunct Uranus, over the course of a day, something could happen that maybe you hadn't fully planned for. And if you haven't got a plan and you're very rigid, then you might be completely confused, and you just might not know what to do. So always have a plan B, even if you have absolutely no intention of putting that plan B into action, because something might happen which you just hadn't occurred to you. So Taurus, be a little prepared. I mean, I think in most cases it's just going to be okay to just keep moving in the same direction. Turning to relationships, the moon is making a trine to Mars. So Mars is ruler of Scorpio, which is your opposite sign. And so with moon trine Mars, that indicates to me that there is someone out there who's certainly worth listening to. I mean, I don't think in the first instance you're particularly in the mood for listening to another person, but I think you should consider making a space. Someone has space for that person. Someone has got something to offer. And I think at the very least you should consider what they're trying to say and how they're trying to say it, because people have many different ways of communicating, and some people might communicate in a quite roundabout way. And I think with that moon trine Mars, the way someone tries to get their message across may not be immediately obvious. And that's because the moon is in quite an introspective sign from a Taurian perspective, and so is Mars. And you just have to be a bit sensitive to what someone is trying to communicate, because I think you can benefit, and overall there are people in your life at the moment who are in a strong position, but perhaps you aren't fully recognizing how strong their position is, and maybe you would be well advised to be listening to what they're saying. Gemini. Just remember, Gemini, that Mercury is moving out of Aries. It will not be in Aries for much longer. It's going to move into Taurus really soon, like tomorrow. And so you need to be prepared for that changeover. And because there is this changeover coming up, perhaps it's not actually a time to be making commitments. You might feel you want to make a commitment, but if you were to make a commitment now, you might be making that commitment on the basis of a false premise, or you simply just don't have enough information. And so perhaps, Gemini, you should just wait for a couple of days. Wait for Mercury to change sign and go into Taurus. And then I just think that you will be in a better position to work out what needs to be done. And at the same time, I would be a little bit careful right now about revealing too much. I mean, Gemini is a talkative sign, and you might just say something about yourself, about what you're doing, which may be inadvisable. Some things need to be kept secret, and if you were to reveal a secret now, when it seems to be the right thing to do, you might very soon find in a couple of days' time that you've actually compromised yourself. And in a few days' time, you may move into a phase of your, I don't know, it's not going to last that long, but you're going to, for the next few weeks, secrecy is going to be quite important to you. So be careful what you divulge, and don't divulge things unless it's really important. From a heliocentric perspective, you should be aware that there is a sextile aspect between Mercury and Neptune. Mercury is your ruler. Neptune is a planet often connected with spirituality, moving beyond one's boundaries, moving into like something else, perhaps of a sort of a spiritual, cosmic nature. And with that Mercury sextile Neptune, I think you're going to be very sensitive to what is going on around you, not just in your immediate environment, but just the wider cosmos. You're going to be picking up on a lot of stuff. And I understand that Gemini is not a particularly sensitive sign. And I say that as being a Gemini myself. I can be appallingly insensitive. I think I'm getting better over the last few decades, but there is an insensitive streak in every Gemini. But our sensitivity is going to be more pronounced than usual, I think, with this Mercury sextile Neptune. And the sextile aspect, remember, must emphasize it is a heliocentric sextile, not a geocentric sextile. It's a heliocentric sextile. And sextiles are about talent. And perhaps we can use our sensitivity to make sense of a world. And once we make sense of a world, we will be in a better position to take effective action. And action is important to us. And I think, although it's important to keep our secrets, I think, but one thing perhaps we should not keep secret is our broad desire and our broad intentions. If there's something we want, then, Gemini, I think we need to be very clear about it. There's no point in holding back. We don't have to use complicated language or spend ages explaining ourselves. We just say what we want. And if we're clear about what we want, I think people will listen, and they may well oblige, and they may go some way towards providing us what we want. And we're helped by the fact that there is a trine aspect between the Moon and Mars today, and I think that Moon trine Mars is going to help us to engage with some of the people who matter. We'll be able to communicate very well, and I think I've already said that we've got Mercury sextile Neptune from a heliocentric perspective, and that's really going to help us. And so we need to be clear about that. This with this sextile, we can this sextile is, I think the Mercury sextile Neptune is going to allow us to communicate something in a way that is going to be convincing. We know what to say to get people onto our side. And that's kind of connected with our sensitivity. So overall, Gemini, it seems to be a good day, but we do have to accept that we should not be making firm decisions, because there are some important things that are up in the air that we do need to take into account. Cancer. The moon is very much in Leo, and that moon in Leo is trine Mars, and it is trine the North Node. And with the moon trine Mars and trine the North Node, I think that you're going to be pretty dynamic, especially when it comes to material stuff, money, career, business, that kind of thing. You will make your opinions very clear, and I think you're going to be a hard person to defy. So if you're very clear about what you want, I think people will just say, okay, that's what Cancer wants. And just Cancer, it's such a strong sign. It's always that big mystery. Why is Cancer the strongest of the 12 signs? It shouldn't be. There's no logic for it, but it just is. I don't know why. Maybe that's just my subjective experience, but it seems that you shouldn't take on a Cancer. It's always unwise. Somehow they always get the better of you. And so with the moon trine Mars, I think that you really will know how to assert yourself. And you see, you have to look that, moon is in Leo. From your view, Leo is a sign that is connected with money and what you own. Mars is in Aries. That is a high-profile sign from a Cancerian perspective. So having this trine which links the money sign with the career, business and status sign, which is Aries, when you've got that moon trine Mars, Cancer, things really go very well for you. And I don't think you should be shy about asking for things. I think people will just listen and they will give you what you want, and it is the right thing to do, and that's really important. Is it the right thing to do? To be pushy, to be a leader rather than a follower? Yes, of course it's the right thing to do. North Node is in Aries. The Moon is trine. The Moon, your ruler, is trine the North Node. You don't have to be shy, and so make sure that you are seen and heard, because Cancer, you have got a great deal to offer. And in terms of your ambitions, yes, you're ambitious, yes, and yes, I think you can achieve many of your ambitions, or at least today you can go a long way towards grounding those ambitions in reality. Leo, the Moon is right in the middle of your sign, Leo, and I think that is pretty fortunate. You are a Leo. When the moon is in Leo, you feel at one. You feel that you're in the right place. And Leo, you are helped by the fact that the moon, while moving through your sign, is making a trine to Mars. And so that means, Leo, that you do not have to be content with second best. So if something isn't good enough, you don't have to think, well, it's better for nothing. No, you have every right to go for the very best. And it's not a day for lowering your expectations. And when I'm talking about expectations, I'm not just talking about material things. I'm talking about expectations in terms of excitement and inspiration, particularly inspiration. You have a right to be inspired. You've got a right to see everything in terms of the best possibility, the best it can possibly be, and to be given experiences which are, which expand your horizons, which do not restrict you. And if you are involved in anything that restricts you and seems to restrict your options, then I would suggest you give it a miss. Today is a day for increasing your options, not for reducing them. So in that sense, Leo, yes, it's very important that you are ambitious. And in terms of choices, Leo, you should always make a choice about the thing that is most interesting, most exciting. Okay, not all. Okay, within reason. I'm not inviting you to take risks, but I am inviting you to give yourself more and to push yourself, to challenge yourself. If something is easy and you've done it before, then where's the growth? Where's the development? If something is new, there's a bit of a challenge there, then that's the way to go. I suppose you could say, well, you only live once. Well, do you? Okay, there's reincarnation, isn't there? But you don't want to be in a situation where you have an opportunity and you may not get this opportunity again, well, perhaps until your next incarnation. So do consider that. So really go for it. And also, I should point out that the Sun continues to be making a conjunction to Uranus. Okay, that conjunction was exact yesterday, but it is still there. And I think, Leo, that puts you in a state of mind where you are quite independent-minded. You want things done your way. And yes, you have high standards, and you don't, as I've already said, you don't want to go for second best. In fact, the second best is always going to be unacceptable. And it may also occur to you, Leo, that in terms of your social environment, you may feel that some people are just not pushing themselves as much as they should be. Maybe they're just being a little bit too shy, they're being a bit too reserved, and that might irritate you a bit. But it's not really about getting angry, it's about getting enthusiastic. What people need is enthusiasm. And today you can be really enthusiastic, and I think everyone will pick up on your enthusiasm. And because of your enthusiasm, you can bring people together, and you can create an atmosphere of cooperation. Obviously, that applies particularly if you're engaged with lots of other people, perhaps at work, perhaps you're doing something relating to your social life, but you can really engage people, whatever you're doing. And so don't take people at face value. If they seem to be negative, if they seem to be not interested in anything, well, you can actually change that. Put in a bit of effort, and you will be surprised at the kinds of transformation that you can bring about. Virgo, you seem to be quite definite at the moment, perhaps more definite than usual. While I think you have some appreciation of your weaknesses, you understand that now is not a time for completely blasting outwards on at full power. I don't think that's going to work too well. You're just not quite in that mood. You're not quite in the mood for having a hectic social life. There's a lot you want to keep to yourself. Yes, that is all true. But at the same time, you do have a growing sense of what you need to do. And I don't think you're in a situation where you're trying to make up your mind about something. I think, Virgo, really you have now made up your mind. It's starting to become very clear. And because you've made up your mind, you're coming over in a better light. I think people are more inclined to believe you. Now, you might not see that fully for another day or two. You possibly have to wait for the moon to move out of Leo and into Virgo. There's still a certain sense of preparation, but still, Virgo, I think your clarity and your strength of purpose, it's becoming increasingly obvious. So don't feel it can't be done, and don't feel that you can't have an influence, because really, Virgo, you can have a very big influence if you just make the effort. I think people will really will like you, and they will pick up on your strength of purpose. Now, if you might not feel that you've got a strength of purpose, as I've suggested, but I think over the next day or two, you will start to be very clear about what you want. And I think it's not really a time anymore for just making decisions, because I think that fundamentally, Virgo, you have made your decision, and it's just something needs to be fine-tuned. And I suppose that fine-tuning is connected with the fact that Mercury, which is your ruler, is now moving into the last degree of Aries, and it's getting ready for a sign change. And that sign change happens tomorrow. Mercury moving from Aries into Taurus. And I think that sign change is going to be quite dramatic. I think that it's going to make you a lot more positive, and you're going to have the confidence to start exploring and to be, just considering new possibilities. But just right now, as Mercury makes a switch, there's probably nothing much that has to be done. And really, you should just have that inner certainty that you've sorted everything out, and it's just a stage of preparation. But that preparation stage is coming to an end. And as I've said, very soon the moon will move into your sign at the same time, pretty much, as Mercury moves into Taurus. Remember, Mercury in Taurus is great because Mercury in Taurus is an earth sign. Virgo is an earth sign. So I think that is really something to be looking forward to. Libra, you continue, I think, to be in a fairly strong position. You have a good understanding of what you want, and I think that you actually are starting to believe that some of your hopes for the future are actually possible. I mean, there has been perhaps a little bit of negativity recently, but I think it's starting to become clear that certain things are possible. They might not be easy, but they can happen. And perhaps you're realizing, Libra, that the best way of getting what you want is to get the right level of support. So where would that support come from? Well, other people are important. That is something that just you can't ignore that. Especially today when the moon is trine Mars. So if we look at this trine between the moon and Mars, we see that the moon is in Leo. From a Libran perspective, Leo is a very sociable sign. Mars is in Aries, which is in your opposite sign. So that means there are some strongly placed people who are, I think, fundamentally honourable. I mean, they may be a little bit hard to deal with. They might be a little bit too assertive for your liking, but nonetheless, they're people who mean well. And I think that if you approach them in the right way, you can actually engage their energy. So if you don't feel that on your own you've got enough energy, then I think that you can actually engage another person's energy. And with that extra energy, I think that will really propel you forward. Though I should say that although other people are important, you do need a little bit of discernment. Sometimes Librans can actually have surprisingly weak discernment. It can happen with other people. Perhaps it's because they don't want to say no. In fact, Librans can find it difficult to say no, perhaps because they want to make everyone happy. But in the process, you could waste a lot of time today with the wrong people. People who may be well-meaning, but also could waste a huge amount of time. So time wasting is something you have to be careful of today. I mean, I understand that you're sociable. I mean, I understand that you want to be with people, but you have to make some choices. Some people can do you a lot of good, but other people are just going to be all over the place. And they might make promises that are unrealistic. They might make claims that are absurd. But Libra, I think you're going to know who these people are. And I think you've got to think about your own interests. I mean, if you follow every single person you meet, then you'll never get anything done. And I do think that is a possibility, and I don't think you're helped by the fact that today the moon is making a square aspect to Venus. So Venus is obviously your ruler, and Venus is strongly placed at the moment because Venus is in Taurus. Venus in Taurus is quite intense, quite focused, but then it's making this square to the moon in Leo. And that moon in Leo could be a time waster. And because it's moon in Leo, there might be a certain danger of flattery. Watch out for people who flatter you. So if someone pays you compliments today, immediately your alarm bell should be ringing, because you then have to ask, what does this person want? They may not actually want anything in particular. They may actually just want to waste your time. They might want to talk to you for half an hour about nothing. And then after half an hour, you realize, how much time has just gone, and you're never going to be able to get that time back. So that means, Libra, you have to be choosy. There are people who can really help you get what you want, really, really help you. And you have to work out who these people are. And there are other people who just, as I just said, could completely waste your time. And you have to be very serious and very focused, because, Venus is still in Taurus. And Venus in Taurus, from a Libran perspective, is about being serious, and it's about concentrating on a single goal. Scorpio. Scorpio, I think that you can get quite a lot done today. I think that you've got a lot of energy, and I think, Scorpio, you're going to be able to use that energy in a pretty constructive way. You're going to be able to streamline what you're doing. Perhaps in a recent past, some of the things you've been doing have been getting nowhere, or you don't really need to do them now, and you don't have to do as much as you thought you had to. Maybe you're doing 6 different tasks, and actually you only need to do 1 or 2 different tasks. So that streamlining process, I think, is pretty important today. So work out what matters today and maybe tomorrow. There are other things, maybe they might be important at a later stage, but they're not absolutely essential. And if something is not essential, then maybe you can put it on the back burner. And so in that sense, Scorpio, I think it's going to be really important that you maintain your priorities. Now, probably the main aspect today affecting you is a trine between the moon and Mars. Now, Mars rules Scorpio, and Mars is currently in Aries. That's a great place for Mars to be. And that moon allows you to just focus your energy onto getting results. And I think you're going to be very clear about what results you want. And I think you're in a position to to focus on your desires. Every Scorpio has a set of desires, and those desires, provided they are reasonable, I believe can happen. So I think it's a day which, in that sense, can be very useful. But I should point out that, like yesterday, the Sun remains in conjunction to Uranus. Okay, it's not as strong as it was yesterday, but the Sun is still there, still making that conjunction to Uranus. And that conjunction between the Sun and Uranus takes place in Taurus, which is your opposite sign. And as I think I was saying to you yesterday, this Sun conjunct Uranus can represent someone who is pretty stubborn. They like things done their way, and you have to work out how best to negotiate the situation. I don't think it's a situation where there are winners or losers. Because in order to be 100% successful, it does seem that you are going to have to get someone else's support. You may even have to change someone's mind. Someone who is quite stubborn. So whose mind do you have to change? And how are you going to change their mind? And in order to change their mind, you have got to use all of your subtlety and all of your sensitivity. And it may be about making promises. It may be about perhaps revealing something about yourself. But I think it can be done. But there are, as I've been suggesting, there are people that have to be negotiated. That you can't. In many cases, you're going to find it very difficult to make progress if you don't consider the people who might be holding you back. They're not holding you back in a major way, but they just do have to be dealt with. They have to be negotiated. And I think, Scorpio, that is very much something you can do. And perhaps, Scorpio, it's just all about doing the groundwork. Everything has to be prepared, and if you've done your preparations, then I don't think you'll have many problems getting through the obstacle course. And I think that the day should end on a fairly satisfactory note. Sagittarius, you are a fire sign. And today there is a trine between the moon and Mars. And that trine between the moon and Mars should really work in your favour. Because it's not just that the moon in Leo is trine Mars in Aries. It's the fact that the moon in Leo is kind of trining Sagittarius, and Mars is trining Sagittarius, even though there are no planets in Sagittarius. Sagittarius is you. So in a way, you complete the triangle, this triangular energy between the fire signs, moon in Leo, Mars in Aries, and then you, Sagittarius. So you complete the triangle. You're the one that makes things happen. So there was all this loose energy flying around, and where was it going? And then suddenly you come along and you pick up on this loose energy. And yes, you really do make things happen. And I think it's just important that you are as imaginative as possible. You don't allow yourself to be limited. Yeah, sure, you might come across people who have their doubts, but I wouldn't get caught on those doubts. I think actually you can address people with a certain amount of authority. That's right, Sagittarius. You can set yourself up as someone who is authoritative, and I think that will be very much appreciated, because a lot of people are confused, they don't know what to do, and if they've got Sagittarius who is exciting and energetic, but also a Sagittarius who really knows what they're talking about and who talks with authority, then you will in a way be quite irresistible. But don't think you have to do everything on your own, because you are actually not the only one who is very sure of themselves. There are a couple of other people who are very sure of themselves, but in a way that is not necessarily a conflicting situation. I think it might actually be gratifying, having people around who share your vision, who, okay, they might not share your vision, but they share your understanding of what needs to be done. And, what needs to be done is action. It is a day for action. And you can create that action, but you're also going to be you're going to find people who also are looking for action. So the idea of action is not just going to be about you, and it's not going to be controversial, because you're going to get people who are going to support you, and by the same token, you are going to support them. And then it's just a question of perhaps some fine-tuning of the details. Okay, perhaps you will have your particular idea about how something should be done, and someone else might have their idea. And I think if you can talk about the matter, I think you'll realize that your idea and their ideas, they're not so far apart, and that perhaps it's a time where two separate plans can be brought together. And somehow when these two plans are brought together, that means you'll have something that will be able to pack quite a powerful punch. Capricorn. Capricorn, something a little strange is going on here. I think that there are some concerns that you might be having. I don't think, Capricorn, you're in a particularly trusting mood. And I think that, Capricorn, you're capable of seeing maybe the darker and less savory side of life. And you can see also where things might lead if people are not careful. And so I think many Capricorns are going to be treading with great caution, because they can see what can go wrong. And I think you're going to be aware of certain people who are playing very dangerous games. And this is not appealing. And there is then the question of how do you air your concerns? In one sense, you don't really want to air your concerns because it's just too complicated. And life does feel a bit complicated today. But at the same time, if you leave people to their own devices, they might get themselves into trouble. And so somehow, Capricorn, you have to take control of the situation. Now, I think you can. In fact, Capricorn, if you're so minded, you can bring to bear an enormous amount of power. And I think this power can really force people to sit up and listen. And if you think that something really is about to go wrong, then that's something that you do need to express. And I think that you're going to be helped by the fact that the moon is trine Mars. Moon trine Mars is very powerful. It's about the expression of deep and sincere energy. And okay, maybe you have to put that energy into persuasion. And if you start trying to persuade people to do something or not to do something, I think it will be very clear that you're serious. Once people realize you're serious, I think that they'll just do things your way. And I think you'll be able to take control of the situation. And in the process, you may be able to prevent people from taking actions or performing actions that could cause them a lot of damage. Another thing to point out is that I think you'll be quite good at dealing with details that are complicated, perhaps relating to money. And, perhaps money has been a difficult subject. People haven't wanted to discuss it. But with this moon trine Mars today, I think you're going to be able to get to the heart of the matter and really start to talk about the important points, things which are difficult to talk about. And no one wants to talk about them except for you. And once you start to express your concerns, but also get down to the details. I think people will listen. And again, we see you being able to take control of the situation and really be able to exercise a powerful and constructive influence. Aquarius. Aquarius, you feel that you can't really do anything unless you get some support and help. And at the same time, you may be of the opinion, well, actually, this support and help isn't really available. So what should you do about it? Maybe there's nothing that can be done, and that may just be your view. So I think in that sense, Aquarius, you shouldn't jump to conclusions. I think it's actually quite easy today for Aquarians to be really negative and to think, well, there's no point in doing anything because other people just aren't up to it. Yet, the moon is making a trine to Mars. And, the moon is in Leo. Leo is your opposite sign. And if you can make the effort just to say something, you might think it's a waste of time. You may just feel that you've got better things to do. But if you could just say something, I think you'd be amazed at how powerful your words can be. Your words can really have a big impact, and you can express yourself with enthusiasm, but also in a way where people just are not really going to want to contradict you. So Aquarius, I think you can really get good results today, even though you think it's all a waste of time. If you just can break the ice, if you can just get your message across, okay, you might think that no one's listening, but actually they are listening, and it won't take long before you start making a big impact. And don't be afraid of springing surprises on people, because if you can spring a surprise on someone and they're just not ready for you, and they don't know how to respond, then you have a moment of power, and that is how you can get results. And it may be springing a surprise. I suppose one way of springing a surprise is to pay someone a surprise visit. I don't know whether that's appropriate, but if you just appear from nowhere and you're not expected, perhaps even the uninvited guest. The uninvited guest is, but a guest who just cannot be ignored, cannot be avoided. Yeah, you as the uninvited guest can actually have a considerable impact. But surprises can be two-way affairs, especially when the sun is still making a conjunction to Uranus. Yeah, it's still there. I know that the sun was exactly conjunct Uranus yesterday, but today it's still there. So with the sun continuing to be conjunct Uranus, that indicates that some of the people close to you are somewhat nervous, they're a bit excitable, and they might just do something you just weren't expecting. And it might at first sight seem really disruptive and really annoying and the last thing you need. But if you find yourself surprised and annoyed and thinking that someone is being unreasonable, maybe you should think again. This may be an indication, Aquarius, that you've just been a little bit too set in your ways, and a surprise is just what you need to move on. And it's also a surprise, can be a very good way of helping you to respect someone. It's possible, Aquarius, that perhaps you've taken someone for granted. You've assumed that they're going to follow a particular script. It's very difficult for anyone to treat another person as a genuine individual. People tend to be projections. We have scripts for the way people are supposed to behave. Of course, that is incredibly disrespectful, but that's what we all of us do when we treat our fellow human beings. We don't actually treat them as individuals. We just treat them as scripted projections. And it seems that today some of your scripted projections might actually start to behave as if they've got a mind of their own, that they're not actually scripted projections. And you might, I don't know, it's like, it's that moment. It's like that scene in, is it Jean-Paul Sartre's Nausea, when he has this realization that something else has an independent identity separate from himself, and it's a real moment of shock. And maybe you're going to experience that kind of shock. Nausea, perhaps. You don't have to be nauseous about it. I think it's actually quite good to realize that another person really does have an independent life. And I think it's a particularly good thing to realize if you are an Aquarian, because Aquarius is an independent sign. And as an Aquarian, it's just important to respect other people's independence and also to respect their autonomy and their free will. Pisces, you seem to think that you're in the right, and you probably are in the right, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have to make a big show of being in the right, because there might be moments when you've just simply overestimated yourself and just thinking you've got it all sorted out when actually you haven't got it all sorted out, that there have been just a few mistakes in places. That is really very possible, that you perhaps haven't got the full picture. So I think, Pisces, a certain amount of humility is required, particularly relating to that 25%. There's probably 75% you're in the right, but there's that 25% when you're not absolutely sure, and maybe actually, who knows, you might be completely wrong. And so it might be a good idea to reconsider and rework many of the things that you've been taking for granted. Just do a little bit of research, look them up, check to make sure. That's just all it takes. Now, aside from that, there is a trine aspect between the Moon and Mars, and I think that this trine aspect between Moon and Mars, I know it sounds exciting, and I think in many cases it is exciting, but from a Piscean perspective, I would have said that Moon trine Mars could be about the need for a certain amount of organization. Just something needs to be sorted out, something needs to be put in order. And it's probably not about other people, it's just about your own life. And before declaring to the world what is true and what is not, you need to just consider what's going on in your life and just making sure that you've got everything right and all the details are in place. And part of that, Pisces, is, I think it is about fact checking. do some fact checking. I don't think that you'll be sorry, and try to focus on yourself and try to be as self-critical as possible without undermining your own confidence, because a bit of self-criticism can be very helpful, because self-criticism is all to do with self-awareness, isn't it? And if you're just aware that there are just a couple of places where you just need to be a little more focused, where you need to be sure of your facts, I don't think that you'll be sorry. I mean, I am sorry though that, in terms of describing what's going on in Pisces, like in the Pisces world today, it sounds a bit tedious. I mean, I don't mean it to sound tedious. I mean, I think that today can be very constructive. I think it can actually be very constructive in a financial sense. So if there is things going on with money that you're feeling dissatisfied about, then I think actually you can take active measures to improve the situation. And it almost certainly does not involve other people. It's about looking at your own finances and having a clear sense of what needs to be done. And, remember, Mars is currently in Aries. So from a Pisces view, Aries is a money sign. Mars is in Aries. Mars is in its own sign. Mars is strong in Aries. This is a time at the moment where you can really stand up for your financial interests. And with the moon trine Mars, I think that you're going to know exactly what needs to be done. And so Pisces, don't hold back. Of course, I'm not inviting you to do anything stupid or to take risks or to gamble. It's just about making sure that your financial situation is as good and as safe and as secure as is possible. And I think you can take steps today to take things put things, or how should I put it, to create even better controls over your finances. It may not be big steps, but a few small steps may be very effective. And so that's the kind of day it should be. So I think it can be useful. And I think today you can give yourself a greater sense of security. And also you can increase your knowledge, because there are some small couple, as I've already said, there are a few details which you are still not 100% sure about, but you can make yourself sure, and you can, where necessary, you can make some self-corrections. And that is Pisces. Those are my forecasts for the 12 signs, and I am now going to turn to the I Ching. And I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 19. So hexagram number 19 is about approach. It means that we are moving towards something, and we've made a decision to take the initiative. And I suppose that may tie in astrologically with the fact that today there is a trine aspect between the moon in Leo and Mars in Aries. That is very much about taking the initiative. And with approach, we're in a position where we feel that we're ready to do something, I won't say spectacular, but it is a time to take action. And I think that our approach will get support. I think people will like what we're doing, like what we're planning. And even if we're not used to being in a position of leadership, it actually may be a time when it's okay to be a leader. So the follower can be a leader. So if you regard yourself as a follower, I don't know how you regard yourself, but if you regard yourself, even if you feel that in some respects you're in a lowly position, you can basically take the view that you understand what's going on and you deserve to be listened to. And I think that your sincerity will be obvious. People are going to listen to you, and hence leadership. And this hexagram 19 is about leadership and deciding that it is time to move forward. And there is a moving line here. The second line moves, and this second line, it is about getting followers. It's about getting people to listen to you. People will listen because you seem to be the right person in the right place at the right time. So this hexagram approach, it moves to hexagram number 20, hexagram number 24, which is return. Now, there's a bit of a contradiction there. You move from approach to return. And going back to approach, one of the things that is in approach is a warning that things are looking good, but then at the 8th month comes misfortune. Now, there's always this enigma. What does the 8th month actually mean? So you could say that the 8th month probably is about, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the 8th month would be kind of sort of August, September, because you have to look at it from a Chinese perspective. So Chinese New Year starts, when does the Chinese New Year start? January, February. So you kind of count perhaps 8 moons or however. I mean, Chinese astrology, by the way, is something I know nothing about. I mean, I'm okay on Western astrology. I have a good understanding of Vedic astrology. Chinese astrology, I know I do the I Ching, but when it comes to Chinese astrology, it's not a subject that I have studied. I thought I'd make that clear. But anyway, the 8th month would seem to be around August, September. And so it may be that if we're thinking about starting something, that this approach with this goal, something we're moving to, maybe we need to be careful how far we go, and maybe August, September is the time to pull back. But it may just be more general than that. We are going to move in a particular direction, but we know that at a certain point we're going to have to stop. We're not going to be able to go all the way. And so this leads us back to hexagram 24, which is return. There comes a point when we realize we've gone far enough. Now, as far as timing is concerned, return, actually, the I Ching talks about after 7 days. So we return after, it might be literally a week, but there comes a point where we know we can't go any further. If we take things any further, we will be starting to take a bigger and bigger risk, and if we just keep going, it will be disastrous. That is one view. But I think we're going to know that point. So if we look at this hexagram, this I Ching reading overall, it's about we are in a position where we're going to be making some kind of advance, and we may be taking other people with us because we're going to be very convincing, and leadership is the right role for us to adopt, and we're going to advance up to a point, and then we're going to realize when that advance has reached its limit, because we don't want to take risks, and then we're going to come back. And that brings us to the concept of return. And there's a feeling of mission accomplished. And so that's the I Ching for today. And I now want to consider the conjunction between the Sun and Uranus. And so yesterday, which was Monday, there was a conjunction between the Sun and Uranus. And I did want to talk about it yesterday, but then I found myself talking about the Eurovision Song Contest. And so I'm now going to talk about Sun conjunct Uranus. And the Sun conjunct Uranus, in terms of events, well, you think that a Sun conjunct Uranus event, you'd think something unexpected. So when you've got Sun-Uranus conjunction, you'd think something to happen. Wasn't expecting that. Something happening out of the blue. I mean, Uranus is a planet of revolution. It's a planet of things that are somewhat unstable, things getting out of control. In a natal chart, well, we have to remember perhaps that the Sun is a male planet. It could be that Sun conjunct Uranus impacts men differently in a different way than women. You would have expected Sun conjunct Uranus in a male chart to be more likely to be owned than in a female chart. I'm not saying that as anything written in stone. It's just something to consider. So perhaps a woman who has Sun conjunct Uranus may be attracting men who are of the nature of Sun and Uranus, perhaps men who are very independent-minded, who are rebellious, who are unstable, who things can just happen. So that is certainly a possibility. But as I said, I don't want that to be sort of written in stone, and it kind of depends on the situation. But someone with Sun conjunct Uranus, you would expect them to be quite perhaps unusual, to be independent-minded, to be stubborn. They could be revolutionary. They could be someone who could just be, be into making discoveries. I mean, Uranus is the discoverer. And so there are a number of ways in which the Sun-Uranus conjunction can work. So what I want to do now is just go through some charts of some people and events which have Sun conjunct Uranus. So let's start off with someone I looked at very recently, and I mean I've already mentioned it a few days ago, and that was the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski. So Ted Kaczynski, as I said, I talked to him about it a few days ago. So Ted Kaczynski, he was a Unabomber. He was upset by the modern world. I think he had a cabin in the woods, and he observed environmental destruction at first hand. And remember, Ted Kaczynski he was a maths PhD. He was a really clever guy. I think he was on the autistic spectrum, and he just didn't know how to deal with this devastation in front of him and all the issues he saw with the modern world. And he responded to the situation by sending bombs. Some people were killed. He sent bombs to university departments. It seemed a very extreme thing to do. And here is Ted Kaczynski's chart. So Ted Kaczynski, there's his Sun conjunct Uranus. And you can see his Sun conjunct Uranus is exact. His Sun, we got a birth time here. So Sun at 0 degrees 26. Uranus at 0 degrees 26 Gemini, Sun at 0 degrees 45 Gemini, and also Saturn involved as well. So Sun on the Saturn-Uranus midpoint, I mean, the Saturn may have helped had really turned it into something frustrating. I suppose maybe his inability to deal with the outside world and to communicate in a normal way is reflected by the fact that he had Sun on the Saturn-Uranus midpoints, the Sun in that conjunction with Saturn and Uranus. But the Sun and Uranus is the bomber. Sun conjunct Uranus, and I think that is really very clear. I don't think that really needs to be explained. And so Ted Kaczynski certainly illustrates one way in which the Sun-Uranus conjunction can work. The Sun-Uranus conjunction can also be a revolutionary, someone who turns everything upside down. And someone who was a revolutionary was a very brutal revolutionary, was Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein was a Taurus, and he had a, I don't have his time of birth, he had a Sun-Uranus conjunction in Taurus. Taurus can be actually quite a brutal sign. A lot of quite vicious dictators have their Sun in Taurus. I mean, Hitler was a Taurus, Pol Pot was a Taurus, Maximilian Robespierre was a Taurus. So it can be quite brutal, and certainly Saddam Hussein was a Taurus. And so with Sun conjunct Uranus, he could create massive change. There was the situation where he took control of his country, where he had this huge conference where all his party leaders were there, and suddenly this man stood up on the podium and started condemning all of these people publicly and accusing them of plotting against the country. And there was this scene on film of all of these Ba'ath Party officials being dragged away to be executed or shot or whatever. And so that is Sun conjunct Uranus, sudden change, and there can be a brutality to Sun conjunct Uranus. Sun wants to express itself. Uranus is not about sensitivity. It's not Neptune. It's not about compassion. Not in itself. And I think that is perhaps how his Sun conjunct Uranus was expressing. Although in Saddam Hussein's chart, notice there's no water in Saddam Hussein's chart, so it's dry, and the ends perhaps justify the means, and so that's maybe how his Sun conjunct Uranus was actually working. So looking at some other people who have Sun conjunct Uranus. Now, another person who was really unpleasant, who had Sun conjunct Uranus, was Roland Freisler. Roland Freisler was a Nazi who was he was head of the People's Court. So after when the plotters, the July of 1944 bomb plot against Hitler, they all came before him. Those that survived but weren't executed or committed suicide immediately after it came before him. And so you can see he has his Sun conjunct Uranus in Scorpio. I mean, he certainly had water in his chart, unlike Saddam Hussein. But with that Sun conjunct Uranus, there's something quite vindictive about it. And he took great pleasure in ordering people to be executed. And he liked to have a big show using sort of a dramatic language. And he had witnessed Stalin's show trials I mean, he was a communist before he became a Nazi, and he'd witnessed Stalin's show trials. And so he really got off on this Sun conjunct Uranus. I mean, I suppose you could see that Sun conjunct Uranus as a bit of projection there. I mean, the Sun conjunct Uranus is sort of projecting his enemies and his demons, projected onto the people coming before him in court. Although Sun conjunct Uranus can also be about how it all ended. And so we saw with Ted Kaczynski how he was the bomber. And so there is a link with bombs with Roland Freisler in that he was eventually killed by a bomb on, I think, February the 3rd, 1945. He was killed by an American bomb. And so that Sun conjunct Uranus on his 7th house cusp may indicate how he died. That would kind of make sense. I mean, if the sun is his life force, conjunct Uranus, he was killed by a bomb, and so that might be a manifestation of how it's working. But Sun-Uranus conjunction, talking about people who have had problems with the law, well, Rolf Harris. Now, in Rolf Harris's case, Sun conjunct Uranus comes up all the time. So the first chart relating to Rolf Harris. So Rolf Harris, remember, Rolf Harris was an Australian musician and entertainer who dominated British television, I don't know, in the 60s and the 70s. And being a child in the 60s and the 70s, you just couldn't, you just could not avoid Rolf Harris. Rolf Harris was just always on television with his didgeridoo and his whatever, and he was, everyone loved Rolf Harris, and he had charitable works, and he painted the Queen and so on. Yet he came unstuck through his sexual activities, and he went to prison. I said, I don't want to go into details about his sexual activities, but clearly he just thought he could do what he wanted. And that could be one aspect of Sun conjunct Uranus. So if you have got, you see here, he's got Sun in Aries conjunct Uranus. So if you have got Sun in Aries conjunct Uranus, you're going to take the view, I can do what I like. I mean, that's Aries. And I'm not saying that's always how Aries works, but in his case, Sun conjunct Aries was just thinking he could do what he liked. And somehow he was above the law. I mean, Aries is about action. Aries isn't really sort of contemplating things very much. And I suppose there could have been a fundamental arrogance there, because there were other people involved in television at the time. Whether it's Jimmy Savile, other people. I can't think of anyone else that comes to mind. But it was just commonplace that people just, if they were TV stars, they could do what they liked, and they could get away with what they liked. And I suppose Rolf Harris was part of that. And if you've got 5 planets in Aries, Moon in Aries, Mercury in Aries, Sun in Aries, Mercury in Aries, Venus in Aries, you can see that complete selfishness and just a belief that you can do whatever you liked. Now, he was arrested this was his arrest chart. He was arrested on March 28th, 2013. And when he was arrested, now remember March 28th, now look at his birthday. He was just 2 days before his birthday. Rolf Harris was arrested at his home. I think it was near Reading in England. I don't know what time he was arrested, but there was a Sun conjunct Uranus in Aries when he was arrested. So that reminds us of something in astrology, that things can actually sort of repeat themselves. So if we're born under a particular configuration, even if that configuration doesn't necessarily make an exact transit, we can be influenced by it. Although in this case, his natally he's got Sun at 8 Aries, Uranus at 11 Aries. At his arrest, Sun was at 7 Aries, Uranus was at 8 Aries. So he had a Sun-Uranus conjunction, was transiting his own Sun-Uranus conjunction. So we get the sort of complete repetition at the time of the arrest. Plus, you can see at the time of his arrest, you've got a lot of planets in Aries. You've got Venus in Aries, Sun in Aries, Uranus in Aries, Mars in Aries as well. So you can see that when he was arrested, he was quite old. He was arrested on his Uranus return. So we think about Saturn returns when you're 29 and difficult things happening. But in his case, it all came unstuck when he hit his Uranus return. So you hit your Uranus return when you're approximately 84 years old. And so he went to prison. And then eventually he died, as people do. And so here is a chart for his death. He died on May the 10th, 2023. And unsurprisingly, at the time of his death, there was a Sun-Uranus conjunction. So Rolf Harris was born on a Sun-Uranus conjunction. He was arrested on a Sun-Uranus conjunction. And he died on a Sun-Uranus conjunction. Another person who had a Sun-Uranus conjunction, who I really don't know very much about, was this Korean pop star, one of these K-pop people who he died a year or two back. Moonbin. And so Moonbin was born on January 26, 1998. And Moonbin, I think he died in April 2023. So he died when he was around 25. That right? Yeah. So he died when he was 25, and he has his Sun-Uranus conjunction in Aquarius. So, again, I'm not, in his case, by the way, I've got house cusp, but I don't really know when he's born. So let's give ourselves Aries cusps on that. Just to make it absolutely clear, I have no idea when he was born. So with Moonbin, what does it mean to have a Sun-Uranus conjunction? Now, you could say that if you look at his picture, he's quite unusual. He stands out. And I suppose if you want to be a pop rock star, and I understand that, well, not a rock star, just a singer. I don't know anything about K-pop. Rock star is not the right word to use. But if you want to be a singer, I suppose you've got to stand out. I mean, being a singer in Korea, you're all part of a process, and you don't really have much time. Your life is completely controlled. So you could say, well, Sun-Uranus conjunction is someone who stands out, and that might have been why those involved with the pop industry in Korea, the K-pop industry, chose him, and why he was able to advance so quickly, and how he was able to get so many fans. Clearly, a lot of people really care about him and were really upset when he died. But the Sun-Uranus conjunction might as well have been about his need to be independent. And that's what Sun-Uranus can very much be about. And I suppose if you have a very controlled life, there's a bit of a clash there, isn't there? You want to be independent, but everything's being controlled for you. And so Sun-Uranus, something has to break. I mean, I think he committed suicide in the end. And I suppose you might associate that Sun-Uranus conjunction with just the pressure in Aquarius, a fixed sign. The pressure got so much that, yes, in the end, he killed himself. Then there is Chelsea Manning of, let's get this right, WikiLeaks. So Chelsea Manning was a soldier in the American Armed Forces, and Chelsea Manning leaked documents, I think, to WikiLeaks. And Chelsea Manning has a Sun-Uranus conjunction. So Sun-Uranus conjunction in Sagittarius just maybe about just doing something that is unusual, or just feeling something has to give. And Sagittarius, there might be a certain set of principles there. Something has to be released. They don't like something. They don't like the secrecy. I don't know about the real reasons why Chelsea Manning released the psychological reasons, but something must have snapped. And there's Chiron, opposition Sun. So this Sun-Uranus conjunction is doing something quite independent, I would have said. And I suppose, obviously, Chelsea Manning made a decision to change gender, and also before that to leak documents. So, I think Chelsea Manning was a fairly humble soldier. Is it private? Was that right? I don't know if they were even a corporal or anything. I think they were just a private. I don't know. I mean, I'm not an expert on this, but Chelsea Manning decided to be an individual and decided to do something quite dramatic, and just having that Sun conjunct Uranus perhaps facilitated it. And that Sun conjunct Uranus is square of a nodes, and so perhaps well, in fact, there's a grand cross here. If you take the North Node, South Node, Chiron, and the Sun Uranus conjunction, it was probably the right thing to do for her. North Node square Sun Uranus. That was the thing she had to do, and it was right because the nodes were tied up with it. But that is an example of how the Sun Uranus conjunction might work. I now want to consider some events, or shall we say organizations, which have Sun Uranus conjunction in them. Hamas. I believe Hamas was founded on December the 14th, 1987, I think in the wake of one of the intifadas. And Hamas came into being with the Sun opposition conjunct Uranus, also conjunct Saturn. And in this case, we could see Sun Uranus, a revolutionary organization. But quite a doctrinaire and dogmatic revolutionary organization, as Sagittarius can be. Sagittarius can be incredibly doctrinaire and dogmatic. Sagittarius can be over-moral. It's got to be done. We don't care about money, economic development. It's the cause that matters. We're going to do it. Some higher principle, and of course it might be religion. And so that might be how the Sun-Uranus conjunction is working, but you throw in the Saturn as well. It's a very tough kind of revolutionary group, Hamas. And I suppose you could say principled, but its ideology is tough. That's, as I said, that is Sagittarius, particularly when you throw Saturn in with it. But still, Sun Uranus is about revolution. The core of this organization, Hamas, is Sun in Sagittarius, conjunct Saturn in Sagittarius, conjunct Uranus in Sagittarius. And so that completely fits. Of course, this Uranus is opposition Chiron. Hold on, when was one question I have is, when was Chelsea Manning born? Chelsea Manning was born on December the 17th, 1987. So if Chelsea Manning was born on December the 17th, 1970. In fact, Hamas was born 3 days before Chelsea Manning. trivial point. But so in a way, when these two things were born, so Chiron, opposition Uranus, opposition Saturn, opposition the Sun. As a result of this event, two things happened. Chelsea Manning was born and Hamas was born. So I'm not saying that as a way to be derogatory about Chelsea Manning. I think that just needs some thought, but it just shows how the planets can manifest in different ways. An organization that comes into being in Gaza is not quite the same as someone who's born in the US. I mean, who joins the US Army, and they are two different events. But in both cases, you've created people or an organization who is, in their own way, are very revolutionary and are very dramatic. So that is an organization. Events. I was in Goa at the end of 1984. I was end of 1984. It's December 1984, and I heard the news that there had been a chemical explosion in Bhopal, December the 3rd, 1984. That's where I was. I was in Goa, and Bhopal was an absolute catastrophe. It was a chemical plant. Bhopal is in the middle of India, and it was run by this American company called Union Carbide, and it was all about this substance called methyl isocyanate. I think that's right, methyl isocyanate. And something went wrong with the process, and I think at this time is right, 12, quarter to 1 in the morning. There was a huge chemical leak, and I don't know about the statistics, but I mean thousands and thousands were either killed or maimed or blinded. It was an absolute catastrophe. This town was completely wrecked, and the human cost of this disaster was just absolutely massive. And there was a conjunction between the Sun and Uranus at the time, and I suppose you could say that Uranus was quite close to the IC. So maybe Uranus on the IC, 5 degrees from the IC, talks about some kind of chemical disaster. And at the same time, notice Mercury and Neptune. Mercury is ruler of the ascendant, so when you've got Mercury conjunct Neptune, there are many ways in which, on the Aries point, so in this case, Mercury-Neptune represented Mercury conjunct Neptune represented a chemical leak, and you've got Neptune on the Aries point, or Neptune square the Aries point, and so that's what contributes to the poison. So you had a Sun-Uranus conjunction telling us about the disaster, that there was a disaster, and then the Neptune on the Aries square the Aries point conjunct Mercury is telling us more about the nature of the disaster. It was connected with a poison, in this case a gas, methyl isocyanate. And Chiron was discovered at the time of a Sun-Uranus conjunction. So this is a chart for the discovery of Chiron on November the 1st, 1977. Now, I take the view that if you want to understand what a planet is about, and it's a discovered planet, you should consider looking at the chart for when that planet was discovered. That is going to give you some information. It's not enough just to say, oh, well, it's called Chiron. Let's just go through the Greek mythology books and just read off what it says. I'm not sure if that's the whole. I mean, it's part of it, but I think one should also consider what was going on when Chiron was discovered. And what was going on when Chiron was discovered was that there was Sun conjunct Uranus, and so that Sun conjunct Uranus may tell us something about Chiron's nature. And I'm fairly confident that part of what Chiron means is that Chiron is a maverick. Charles Cowell himself described Chiron as a maverick because of its very elliptical orbit. And sure enough, in a chart of a discovery, we see Sun conjunct Uranus. And I think one way of understanding Sun conjunct Uranus is the rebel, someone doing things differently. And so I think that one can see this Sun-Uranus conjunction at the time of Chiron's discovery as a way of actually understanding what Chiron means as a minor planet. I mean, it's a comet, but it's also regarded as a minor planet. And then we have another Sun-Uranus conjunction event, or something which had Sun-Uranus conjunction implications. And this is when the Tea Act came into force on May the 10th, 1773. So the Tea Act was, I've looked at this quite recently, it was an act that I think reduced the duty on tea from the East India Company. And this allowed tea from the East India Company, when it was sent to the American colonies, to compete with black market Dutch tea. And the Tea Act was a major contributing factor to not just the Boston Tea Party, when all that tea was thrown into Boston Harbor, but to the American Revolution itself. And so at the time of the Tea Act, Uranus had not been discovered yet, so difficult to know what to do. At the time of the Tea Act, there was a conjunction between the Sun and Uranus, and so that kind of fits this event, which contributed to the American Revolution. Now, turning to this weekend. So this weekend, there was the Sun-Uranus conjunction was on Monday, yesterday, but the Sun-Uranus conjunction was in operation for a few days, and I've already turned to the chart of the Eurovision Song Contest. So the Eurovision Song Contest, this is the chart for the beginning of the finals, 9 o'clock on Saturday, and the finals were a little bit unstable. One of the contestants, what's his name, Jort Klein, have I got that right? Was disqualified for supposedly mistreating a woman who was involved in the organisation of the Eurovision Song Contest, and he was disqualified at a very late stage. He'd already got through to the finals with his song Euro Papa, but then he got disqualified. So apparently by Eurovision Song Contest standards, that is unusual. Also, we had the Gaza stuff, and this is in Malmo, and there was this Israeli singer who got heckled. I mean, she managed to get into 5th place in the end, but there was a lot of aggravation with Gaza. So it was a very disrupted and quite chaotic Eurovision Song Contest. So it's not surprising that at 9 o'clock when the finals, I think, were started to be televised, there was a Sun conjunct Uranus on the 7th house cusp. So that was one way in which the Sun-Uranus conjunction worked. Another way, a very unfortunate way in which the Sun-Uranus conjunction was operating, was in Belgorod. So Belgorod is a city in western Russia, very close to Kharkiv, and over the last year, the Ukrainians have just been sending rockets and bombs and rockets to Belgorod. I'm not even sure if they've been really aiming at anything. I think they just wanted to hit Belgorod just to make things unpleasant for Russian civilians. And, using sometimes using weapons provided by the West, or they were using what are these vampire rockets provided by the Czech Republic, so using them to basically target Russian civilians. And at 11:40 a.m. on Sunday morning, local time, I believe, a rocket hit I think it was a Toshka. I don't know. I'm not a great expert on military. A rocket, the Ukrainians fired a rocket, and it hit a residential building. I think it was a 10-story residential building. I saw that 18 people were killed, and apparently this took place at 11. The hit was at around 11:40 a.m. and there is this. There's your Sun Uranus conjunction. Now, it's not exact, but assuming 11:40 a.m. is the correct time, I got that time from a website, pravda.ru. I'm assuming that's local time, and so this conjunction between the Sun and Uranus is exactly square the ascendant. So there is the Sun 22:7 Taurus, there's the ascendant 22:31 Leo. So the Sun conjunct Uranus right there on the ascendant. So that does fit. So when it hits the ascendant, that's when it becomes personal for that city in Belgorod, and that's when the rocket hits. And there is something quite interesting. I mean, it's tragic, of course, but there is something interesting about this chart, is that in terms of the Uranian school which was started by Alfred Witte. So Alfred Witte's original logic for looking for hypothetical planets was that he was trying to predict Russian artillery barrages. Now, this was in the First World War, not the Second World War, the First World War. And he couldn't predict it using the regular planets that he had at his disposal. So he thought, he reverse engineered it. And so he tried to use Russian artillery barrages to work out the position of new planets. So if we had a Russian artillery barrage at this particular time, and I can't see a regular planet there, I'll create a new planet. And it seems a very strange way of working. And as a result of this, he came up with a new planet. His first new planet was called Cupido. And so Cupido is actually the planet of love and marriage and relationships. And if you look at any textbook of Uranian astrology, that is what it's about. But actually, Cupido was first used for predicting for artillery barrages. And if we set this chart up and we use hypotheticals as well. So let me just make this chart look a lot more complicated. I'm just going to open this chart up and let's have a look. Let's look at let's put some hypotheticals in as well. Sorry, the chart's now going to look like a complete mess. But here is Cupido. This was a planet Alfred Witte used to predict artillery barrages, and it's at 8:05 Capricorn. Uranus, you will see, is at 23:03 Taurus. Now, that means that Uranus and Cupido are exactly 135 degrees apart, with about a 2-minute orb. So that was really close. So you can see that if assuming that 11:40 a.m. is correct, then Cupido is sesquiquadrate the ascendant. Cupido is sesquiquadrate Uranus. Therefore, Cupido is on a Uranus ascendant midpoint, and yes, Cupido is also sesquiquadrate the Sun. So this chart maybe takes us back to what the Uranian astrology was originally used for predicting barrages, although in this case, of course, you'd be trying to predict a Ukrainian artillery barrage, and certainly Uranus is, and the Sun-Uranus conjunction was prominent at the time of this tragic attack on destruction of this. I don't know whether it was totally destroyed, but this 10-story residential building was destroyed by this Ukrainian rocket, and it does seem to fit. So unfortunately, this is perhaps another example of the Sun-Uranus conjunction at work. So anyway, that's all I'm going to say about the Sun-Uranus conjunction. I hope you found this video of some interest. If you did enjoy this video, I would be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed and you enjoyed this video, I would of course be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thank you very much for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.